Hello and welcome to the very first APA seminar with Maya Tiwari. I'm very pleased to be with Maya Tiwari for our very first seminar. Of course, let's not waste any time and start on this topic: Vedic nutrition versus vegan nutrition.
Is a very huge topic, actually, and couldn't be very controversial. So we would need to sort of field through our way in a way that makes it more comprehensive for people. And it's good to be here. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Mara. And my question really is, most modernisms, be it vegetarianism, veganism, paleo, all of this, they are based on inclusion or exclusion of certain food groups.
Of course.
So what makes nutrition Vedic in that context?
Nothing makes nutrition Vedic. Vedic is an ancient wisdom that deals with the earth, the preservation of the earth, Mother Nature, and all of the elements that contribute to the world's health, the earth's health, our environment, and everything else. It is ageless and timeless because it doesn't change its concepts or precepts. Environments change, people change, our lifestyle change. But in terms of the nutrition of the earth, what feeds it, what nourishes and nurtures it, that doesn't change. The concepts of food groups has always been interesting. And we find that as soon as we have what is considered an ism, a group, that then it begins to isolate, it begins to separate, it begins to divide. And oftentimes it is responding to making our earth better, making our lives better. Look, veganism came from vegetarianism.
Yes.
And there's marked difference between veganism and its marketing and vegetarianism. The principle of Shakahari is the basic principle of Annam, or food being medicine on earth, and that's the Vedic principle. And the Shakahari is vegetarianism. It has always gone back to the time when Ahimsa, or non-violence, non-hurting, protection of consciousness within the food source is vital to all of life. And therefore, we go back to that principle of the Shakahari. Milk is very much part of the first food in the Vedic culture.
That's mother's milk.
Mother's milk is of course part of our first food, but milk from the cow has been part of the first food in Vedic literature as well. And the reason for that is because of the potency of the milk and its value to the human constitution. We can get back to that later. What I think we have to field through or get past is the concept and the ideas that milk is not human food. I disagree with that completely, as does the Vedas. But the treatment of the animals, the treatment of our milk source, the animal husbandry throughout the world, beginning in the US, then in Europe and elsewhere, is horrendous. I've been writing about this since 1981 in my first book, A Life of Balance. The absolute artillery of drugs and punishment that is put into the cow's feed, and the control of the cow, the control of the animal in terms of controlling its milk supply, denying the young, its babies, the milk, constantly keeping it in that reproductive cycle where it keeps churning out more milk. Even the barbarous acts of cutting their tails so that the vendors don't get slapped in the face, I mean, believe that or not, or dehorning them. I mean, the process is barbarous, there's no doubt about it. Veganism has been very helpful in bringing a lot of that information to the fore.
Mm-hmm.
However, in Vedic principle and perspective, we cannot afford to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And what I mean by that is milk as aushadam, milk from the cow that has 6 stomachs, that can actually eat grass and churn it into this amritam, or elixir that we call milk, When it is left to do its work without being dishonored and dismembered in the way that it has been, feeds its youth and its young, and has plentiful milk left over to supply those people who drink milk.
So from what I get from you, Maya, you found being very radical. Yeah. So a lot of the isms that I have followed in my life, I'm sure some of you, would be for health.
Mm-hmm.
But veganism or non-use of dairy, particularly milk, is based on not harming animals.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I hear from you, you could be as staunch a vegan as you are. If you are not rearing the cows, if you are buying milk or no milk from somewhere, we are all part of that violence. Because how do I know when I don't grow food that actually I'm not contributing to the violence?
That is very, very true. But totally.
Or am I being too radical?
No, not at all. It's not being radical. Look, I appreciate that there is a huge group of society that feels that the only solution to the problem of massively brutal animal husbandry, especially with the cows, has to do with completely boycotting the milk. But veganism goes beyond that.
So you are saying that just by boycotting cow's milk, we are not actually
solving
sure.
The problem.
So tell me more about that,
yes.
and talk
yes.
to audience, because that's the main question.
The main
that most
question,
of us
yes,
have.
we are not actually forming a solution here by boycotting the milk. The cow will give birth. It has its essence, sentiency. Its sentiency is also to nourish the human person. Before I go into the depth of the question, I want to talk a little bit about the quality of what milk produces. We use it in Ayurveda as a vehicle. We make ghee. Ghee is the clarified butter form that doesn't spoil. That ghee is made medicinally so that we can put herbs and other medicines in it and take it into the depth of tissue that it needs to go to. No other carrier but ghee knows how to take that energetic medicine to the right destination.
Yes, I think
we're talking about the efficacies of ghee. We're talking about the efficacy of milk, which we cannot replace. Yes, it comes from another mammal, another animal, in terms of its production.
Yeah.
But also, without going into mythology and without going into the whole concept of sacred cow, we do believe that the interrelationship among various species is what actually preserve human consciousness and human sentiency. We cannot just isolate animals, try to protect them by boycotting a product that is part of the annam and aushadam, meaning the food and the medicine of our good earth, and say that that's going to be the solution. Look, I'll give it 20 years, and we still will not have solved this problem, even if we boycott every gallon of milk.
Why is that? So why do you say that? Because the general belief is that by not using any food that comes from animals, the general belief, yeah, it could be naive, it could be well intended, or there might be a critical thinking behind it, is that by not using any foods that come from animals, we are going to preserve this planet. But you are saying actually that's not going to be
That's not going to be the case. It's not going to be the case because of two reasons. One is commercial. One is something we know very, very well in the food movement. Since 1970s, I have been part of the first health food movement in America. It started in Brookline, Massachusetts, through the macrobiotic people in Irvine. They too never use milk. The fact of the matter is that that movement also ran into a great deal of difficulty, because whenever we make food into a movement, what we're doing is we're beginning to widen the separation between consciousness and sentiency.
I think I'm starting to understand you, because you are looking at food from the very primordial Vedic concept that actually we cannot live in our own independent bubble, and that life sustains life. And it is knowing within that spectrum of how life continues
To interconnect and to interlink with each other. And we need to find the most honorable way to do it. So let us say that we reduce the consumption of milk, completely cut out buying anything commercial. And for those who still buy milk, to make sure that they're buying organic milk. And for those who really are invested in the health and well-being of Mother Nature, because this is what we're talking about. We're not really talking about veganism and vegetarianism. Here we're talking about the health of Mother Nature. What is in her best interest?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can make a commitment to our own community, where we know our farmers, we know our dairy farmers, they're small organizations, family-run places that can produce the raw milk and produce the things and make sure that the animals are cared for, we'll be better invested in having what it is we need as a solution, rather than let us boycott the entire thing across the board. Now, veganism has other areas that are to be questioned, and the area of the carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, we're neglecting milk, and we understand why.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're taking every possible thing that we can in terms of legumes and nuts, etc., 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 and trying to make milk from other things. In the meantime, there's something called the Tanmatra. The Tanmatra is the quantum energy that is being used to produce whatever we need to produce. In this case, we're looking at humongous amount of quantum energy being used and wasted to produce processed food. We have more than 500 million packages of processed vegan foods in America alone, and I'm sure nobody is looking at the carbon footprint that is coming out there, because commercially it is the same as any other production, any of the major commercial organizations that are producing a huge amount of carbon footprint. So when we also look at that aspect, let's look at the further aspect that is not being considered, the economic aspect.
Mm-hmm.
To shop in a health food store, in the vegan quarters of the health food store, which is now predominantly taking over more than 2/3 of the shelves of health food organizations and retailers, we're looking at something like $20 billion worth of sales a year in North America alone, which is fine, except that it doesn't serve a single poor. It doesn't serve a single moderate income person, because it is way too expensive for anyone that is in the middle income and lower income bracket economically to afford it. So who really are we serving with a movement that is becoming more and more elitist, not by intent, but by the progression of food movements?
Yeah, because the intention to not harm other life forms is actually a very noble intention.
Absolutely.
But when that becomes a movement, this would be my comment even for organic food industry and
Yes,
even for vegetarian
yes, of course.
food. Because the way I was brought up is when somebody gives you food with love, receive it with gratitude. And if you can trust the source from where it comes from, you can digest it or you can metabolize it, not just digest it. And I'm sure, some of our members may have a similar confusion, because this morning I went to this vegan cafe. I just had one flat white with almond milk and natural sugars used with fruits, a piece of cake. It was £6.85.
That's very cheap. You got it
I'm
easily.
thinking about that. I'm thinking about the guy who is a homeless person who sits outside McDonald's.
Mhm.
And I question myself,
Look,
who are we
we're
helping?
not blaming the vegan community
No, I'm
for
not.
any of these things. And I want that to be extremely clear. There is no fault here. There is no judgment here. There is a simple assessment of our approaches. And we have had so many food movements in the world, none of it has succeeded to accomplish its goals. Because once food becomes a movement, we divide, we subjugate, we isolate, we become what we have started out not wanting to be, and that is elite.
So what's the relationship that as an individual one must develop with food in Vedic nutrition?
In
What
Vedic
are the
nutrition,
tenets of Vedic nutrition?
In Vedic nutrition, we live with the seasons, we live with the land, we live with the community. Yes, we can have food brought in from other places from time to time. That's fine. The world is connected. We are also terribly connected, and we want to know each other's ancestral whatever, and that's all well and good. But the solution here has always been what it has always been, and that is we must invest our energy in the community building of having smaller communities that work with each other to protect the farmland, to protect the farmer, the local farmer, to protect the local dairy, to protect the local food source, to protect the local environment. That is a mission that will be well accomplished.
So I'm probably not following Vedic nutrition because I buy from Waitrose and Tesco's and Sainsbury's.
No, it's not like that. Everyone in Vedic nutrition, we do the best we can. But at the ultimate end of Vedic nutrition, we make an investment in the protection of Mother Earth, and therefore an investment in our community. We have to go back to building communities. We have to go back to fostering them. We have to go back to have our little meetings and have our little Sunday brunches where we share our meal and our repast, and it came from our neighbor's gardens or this garden. We have to go back to a time and a space when things become simpler, when life is simpler. We have to learn the 6 seasons again. We have to know what is in each of the season. In Wise Earth Ayurveda Online, which is the education that we've just put online with Vedic nutrition, this incredible work brings us back into what we call sadhana, that spirit of practice that keeps us in tune with Mother Nature, with our neighbors, with our family, with our friends. That is a huge oversight. You know, the huge broad stroke action and movement of total activism never really work. It works at a certain level of marketing and broadcasting, but it really, when it comes down to the depth of how far into the earth we can go and make a difference, it doesn't work. Only the human investment of time, energy, and intent can do that.
My question would be, for many of us who do not have the opportunity. I mean, of course, in this country we have got allotments where you can go and grow vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of us, growing food and engaging with local community in having enough resources to feed the community is not the way how our lifestyles are structured.
That is true. So basically,
am I
not
supposed to feel guilty.
No. Not all of us are supposed to be growing food, and not all of us have a piece of land on which we can grow the food. But all of us have a conscience, and all of us have access to those local people who are really trying to do this work, and to support them in any way that we can is very essential.
So it's really about understanding, in Veda, Annam Brahma. Anna is Brahma. And understanding Annam, or food. Is it about sustaining an individual's life, sustaining the life of an animal, or sustaining the life of the planet? And where do we draw the connections and the boundaries, whether I'm actually engaging in an act where I'm sustaining only my individual need for food?
Yes, and there is isolation again. It can never be just the individual focus. It must be a communal focus, a familiar focus, a focus where we are ultimately looking to preserve the life of the planet. Because the life of the planet needs humans. It needs the humanitarian sentiency. It needs the sentiency that only human beings can bring to the planet. And therefore, if we make the broad stroke of understanding we are preserving Mother Nature, then we are actually looking to preserve human sentiency, which means our own sentiency. We're obligated to ourselves in two ways. One is to be the most sentient and conscious being we can be, because we have all of the constructs in which to process consciousness. And in the second way, we are obligated to extend and expand that to those and everything else around us.
So is the key aspect of Vedic nutrition around kindness?
It's around consciousness. It's around understanding that Mother Nature gives us billions of dollars of gifts freely every day. We abuse it, we take it for granted, we show no gratitude for it whatsoever.
So how I interpret is, if I'm not eating dairy product, I don't necessarily am contributing to Ahimsa.
Not necessarily, because what happens is, it's not about that. And I get very sad when I see some of the ads, that they're very divisive ads that talk about, oh my God, the cow is neglecting the young, and you are taking away that milk from the young cow. It's not about that alone. It's about the fact that we have damaged our sentiency as human people, and we need to get it back. And we need to get it back in huge ways, and this is just one field that is extremely ripe for it to be reworked in a way that works. I don't look, in a way, when we start a movement with food, we are already signing up for being allergic to life. And therefore, we need to reconsider this. Food cannot be a movement, because we cannot become allergic to life. And we are becoming allergic to life.
Vedic nutrition is not a movement?
No, absolutely never was.
So can you define to our viewers then, Vedic nutrition is not a movement. It is not an industry. And it is not actually post-industrial.
It never was.
So
it never was. It came from the beginning of time, from the absolute superhuman buddhi minds of the rishis. They understood the configuration of memories and how it all comes down. They understood what nutrition is. Nutrition is not just feeding the 7 dhatus. Nutrition is not just having a little crystal in between each dhatu that actually triggers that good nutrition. And if it's bad nutrition, then it doesn't trigger anything. It simply tries to protect the tissue. I mean, they knew all of these things, but the education is so vast. It is so wise, and it's so timeless. We have never set up a movement with Vedic nutrition. And I even hate the word Vedic nutrition, because basically we never called it Vedic nutrition. Ayurveda is the science of life and the knowledge of life. It includes Dinacharya food. It includes 9 principles and sectors of health and everything else from surgery to psychiatry. However, it tells you to live in accord with your environment. It doesn't say you have to live in accord with the Himalayas or South India. Live in accord with your elements. Live in accord with your temperate or tropical. Live in accord with your southern hemisphere or northern hemisphere. Live in accord with the Agnis. Live in accord with your ancestral makeup. If the ancestral makeup is complex, yes, your health is going to be complex. It tells us all of these things, and most of all, it tells us, Anam Aushadamasti, food is medicine. It grows on the earth. It doesn't float underneath the earth. It doesn't fly above the sky. It doesn't walk on the earth. It has its yajna. A yajna means that when the vegetation came into being, that vegetation came into being as a yajna, sacrifice for human sentiency, to build it.
So Maya Tiwari, are you saying then that within the concept of Vedic way of living, I'm not going to use the word Vedic nutrition, that those who eat animal products, I'm taking the question a little bit further now.
Yes, into Ahimsa.
Like they might eat animal proteins like meat, eggs. What's your comment on that? Are you saying that's not Vedic?
No, I don't have any such definition. I remember a time in ancient life when a community was built amongst each other, the animals, the forest, the water source, and the air, where the community took care of its animals. The bullocks and the cows to tear down and make pots for them. The chickens to lay their eggs and give them some nutrition. Every single animal member of the community was vital to the sustenance of the community. There was nothing that got wasted. And occasionally, in celebration of the human power to want to assume some of the animal energetics of survivalism, our ancestors have eaten meat. But they have never just barbarously killed the animal and left its carcass over there and had excess of it over there. There was never anything like that. They protected the animals. The animals depended on them for love and nurturance. The animals became part of the family of that community. That is a very wealthy community. And that community, it's not about, oh, I'm Vatapit and I can't eat this. That community had nothing to do with, oh, I'm vegan and I can't have eggs. And that community had nothing to do with all of the hard and fast rules that we have, because they lived sentiently, they lived consciously, they lived in communion with what forms the whole, and it was the way it was.
I'd like to ask you this question. I know when you had a conversation with Dalai Lama, you...
Oh.
Is it okay to...
Yes, I'm sure he'll be fine with this.
You asked him, how come, Buddhists eat meat, and where does Ahimsa come in? Now, I'm not trying to be provocative. I like to be critical.
You're entirely provocative.
I want to understand. Because, let me tell you, a lot of our viewers and members, they may not all have been brought up in a vegetarian or a vegan family or environment. So a lot of us, we chose our nutrition as more knowledge and wisdom came our way. And still, there are confusions. And that's why I'm asking, when you had this conversation with Dalai Lama, and
he was very clear with his response. He said that he grew up above the tree line. Yeah. There were no vegetation. The food was the animal. The animal was asked to sacrifice its life for the survival of human sentiency. And I understood that, and I pushed the question a little further. I said, but you've been traveling a lot, and you've been living in New York as well, and we are now living way below the tree line.
So it's an individual choice at the end of the day.
I think for many people, including many of our holy people, it isn't even about an individual choice. The purpose in their life is so intense and so deep and so profound that they take as what is called bhiksha. Now, bhiksha is a whole other principle.
Yes.
The bhiksha is that they take what is given to them as a meal, as a prasadam, as a prayer, as a blessing, and they eat it and imbibe it. They're not overindulging, they're not overeating, they're not saying, I want more lamb, I want more beef, I want more whatever, or where's the beef? They're really not even thinking in terms of where's the beef. What they're thinking of is, I'm thankful for this food. It was given by the Lord. It was given by the community. I will eat it and move on. And at a certain level of spirituality, now I don't want you to get carried away with this, guys, because basically it's very difficult to do. And that is, at a certain level of spirituality, you can transcend what is going into your digestion through prayer.
Are you giving permission?
No, absolutely not. Not everyone can do it. 1 in a trillion person can do it, probably. But I like to be able to keep. You see, we can't live from prejudices, and we can't live from being judgmental. We can assess situations. We can make an opinion on a situation, and it's the most we can do. But what we cannot afford to do is to judge those people who are eating meat, those people who are drinking milk, those people who are not shopping at all the elite health food stores. We cannot afford to do that because we become more and more isolated in our lives. Isolation is the worst possible disease that human consciousness can suffer. And so what we need to do is remain open, stay wide open, try to understand, try to contribute back to Mother Earth, try to build a community, even if you cannot get into the earth and dig into the big, rich, black, beautiful, special Shakti of the Mother. At least try to support those who can and those who do. And let us teach our children likewise. I am most concerned about the privileged families that I have run into in the last 20-odd years of my 30 years of traveling, really, that actually engender in their children the principle of elitism, the principle that those people are eating meat and they're not good, and those people are drinking milk and they're not good. We can't do that. We are destroying an entire generation of sentiency in so doing. So let us at least get humbler in our approach and take a wiser approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it totally makes sense, because what we need to remember is food was never traded in Vedic times.
Mm-hmm. Never traded.
And only when food became
an industry
and a commodity, the confusion about Ayurveda and Vedas becomes so complex, because if you read Charaka Samhita or Ashtanga Hridaya, all food groups have been described, and there is no recommendation that you need to eat this or avoid this. There is a time and place for everything, but you need to use your buddhi, your consciousness to see that it does the least harm to the environment
and the internal environment,
to carry out your own
mission,
purpose in life. And I think making food an identity is something that
very difficult.
Might have
problematic.
Been a prajnaparada in a way.
It is a prajnaparada. It's definitely an absolute insult to sentiency.
Maya, we have questions that have been sent to us, and also some questions I heard are coming on live webinar. I'm just going to take some of those
Sure,
questions
of
if you don't
course.
mind. This question is from Maxine Weiner, and she asks, if according to Ayurveda, we shouldn't be vegan because of health benefits of animal-based foods, how can Vedic nutrition recommendation be adapted for those people who absolutely will not eat non-vegan foods? What replacements can be suggested for items heavily prevalent in Ayurvedic diet, like ghee, milk, yogurt, cheese, that will also offer similar nutrients? So basically, Maxine is asking, what are the substitutes if an individual's decision is not to?
Yes, we don't, Maxine, we do not have to go dairy if we're lactose intolerant or any other reason for not using dairy whatsoever. Almond milk is wonderful. It's a great substitute. Nothing can substitute ghee, so we can keep that out. But coconut, virgin coconut oil has really been very, very helpful in terms of massaging tissue and keeping good health within the system. And no one is saying that one has to follow a milk regimen whatsoever. So I think it's a question of knowing your constitution, knowing what works for you, knowing your best digestive, what is your Agni like, what you digest best, and what suits you best.
May I add something to that,
Yes,
Maya?
of course.
Is that I know that in certain Indian communities, actually they do what's called Chaturmasa, which is 4 months of following certain specific guidelines. It's not a quick movement.
No, it's a product. Yeah, it's a process.
It's been there for thousands of years. And for 1 month, they don't actually have any milk or any dairy. And then the next month, they only have pulses. So there is this concept of balanced way of utilizing resources.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea, in fact, to do that. You know, Ekadashi, which is the fasting, twice fasting a month too, also is very excellent for the same reason. But the 1 month of no dairy and the 1 month of having pulse, following that, I think is it's excellent stuff anyway to clear out all of the ama from the system.
I suppose, there is a need actually to engage with pre-colonial Ayurvedic nutrition,
of course,
which is a lot more
sadhana based
than
grassroots oriented rather than scientifically, medically
evidence
based, right? Of course.
The other question from Maxine is, actually this question is from Carolina. Carolina is asking, the milk and dairy products described in the traditional Ayurvedic texts used to come from Indian cows, which lived in natural environment and were eating grass many centuries ago. I imagine that this milk had a totally different quality and properties compared with the products which we buy in the shop today. Today, the cows are fed with grains, receive antibiotics, and the milk is heavily processed. Could it be that with the change of milk quality, it is no longer advisable for people to take it when they follow Ayurvedic diet?
Absolutely. Carolyn, we cannot have people take polluted milk or contaminated milk. Let us get one thing clear. No one would advocate taking commercial milk. And even some of the organic milk is suspect because of large quantity of its production. You wonder about that. And therefore, we need to be careful with the quality of milk that we are drinking. Going back to the question of the Indian cows, I happen to love the Indian cows as well. But the European cows were also very pure. And they spent lots of centuries on feeding on buttercups and incredible fields. They were well taken care of. Even in my most recent visit to Europe, to France, I was so touched to see how much of that behavior in the countryside had not changed in terms of the cows having their freedom, having their field, going out on their buttercup hunts and doing all of that. So it's not just about Indian milk, but we have to understand that if we live in an area the cows in that area that are natural to that area will be the best milk for us. And if we live in India, the cows in that area will be the best milk for us. Because basically, what we eat from the earth actually contributes to what we need in our own body. And so that's why we say it's so important seasonally, but also territorially where we live, and to eat local.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense, because in Charaka Samhita, which is I think 3rd century BCE, at least from the Western historians, when an individual has total depletion of dhatus, dhatu kshaya, which is called Raja Yakshma, which was compared with tuberculosis, but actually it can relate to cancer cachexia as well. Wherever there is total dhatu kshaya, Charaka actually says you need to ask that person to live amongst goats, to look after the goats, to rear goats, and to live on goats' products.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and the reason for it is goats are extremely capricious and aggressive. They have an incredible internal tissue memory that gives the human the power to fight again for their survival.
So it's interesting to see like how the true Ayurvedic or Vedic literature and tradition actually may have a completely different approach to food than what we today see as a movement.
Absolutely.
There's a question from Evie Kalyani. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. How do you feel about soy in the diet? I used to eat a lot of soy. This is Kalyani. Then Vaidya Mishra told me to stop and wrote how soy is not good for us. I no longer consume soy, but know many vegans who do.
Here's the deal. Soy, like corn, and so many of our legumes and grains, have been completely GMO for more than 3 decades. And so to trust the nature of soy is difficult. To trust the nature of even what they call organic corn is difficult, because these are some of the products that had been under the genetically modified operation for quite many decades. To some extent, one can use it. Soy is always a good food, especially for pitta, like most legumes. However, I would not do it excessively.
What is excessive?
Have it every day.
You don't have a soya.
Yes, and especially,
every day.
And also it's the products made from it. It's all of the products made with different sort of what they call acceptable preservative in the health and food industry, but none of it is really quite acceptable. And it is a food that has been transmuted from one thing to another to suit the human taste bud. Usually those who are eating or meat eaters would miss it, and they try to replicate some sort of comparison or that appeals to the rasa or the tongue. So I would avoid it as much as possible and have pure soy that you know is organic if you want to cook a pot of soy.
Like the Japanese edamame.
Edamame, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think like making almond milk, if you have access to good soy.
Soy, you can make good soy milk. Absolutely, yeah. You know, but let's get back to the hand churners. I mean, if we're going to make our own milk, let us at least put in the effort of doing it by hand, and then we would know the value of what it is to produce milk. And we may have some empathy for what the cows have to do to produce all that milk.
But that's a very, very important point. When you mention that, it reminds me of my childhood. You know, in my family, of course, my family had, economic resources to afford whatever they wanted. But I remember they resisted having a refrigerator.
Right, of course. Home. The same at home.
And they said that's because, we are going to consume things that we don't need.
Right.
We're going to start storing food, and it's going to go off, and it's not going to be good.
No, they're very, very wise. Most of the families in those years, I grew up in British Guyana in a time when we also did not have a refrigerator, nor did we need it. And we were milk drinking villages. So basically you had it fresh, you had it twice a day, and that is the way that food needs to come back. Look, it's a question also, we don't see how it's possible that we can adjust our lives to get back to a time of sentient living, but we have to. There's no shortcut to that.
At least be conscious about it.
Be conscious about it. Yeah.
Because I remember before milk was sold in glass bottles and packets. Actually, I remember, a woman with her cow or even buffaloes, dragging them to the house and tying them to the fence, and then she would milk them, and we would have the fresh milk.
Yeah.
But from then, I'm talking about my own life. From then to now, the whole food industry has changed so much.
It's become an industry. Look, we also had the Green Revolution. We've had so many food movements. We haven't just had these individualistic food movements. The Green Revolution destroyed so much of Mother Earth, and it still hasn't fed a single poor. It still hasn't fed any of the things that we say we were going to do in the Green Revolution. What we're looking at is devastating amount of extremism. We've got to get off the extreme machine and treadmill and really get into what is purely conscious within ourselves. Where is my conscience? Where is my place in this entire thing of protecting Mother Earth? And basically the overriding umbrella is protecting Mother Earth.
And in your books you talk about food for one must be food for all.
Food for one must be food for all, or else we will never have a happy humanity or a healthy humanity. It can't just be for ourselves. It could never be just for ourselves and our privileged families. It just can't be.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by food for one must be food for all?
Meaning that if I can have access to good food, healthful food, the man who has no money should also have access to healthy food. At least that is the very least that humanity owes its humanity, and that is food, good food for everybody. We can't convert people. We can't tell them you can't eat this, you have to eat this. We cannot judge. We don't know what the journey of consciousness and which place in their evolution they're at. And so we help them in whichever place in the evolution that they're at. For instance, when I was in North Carolina, and when I had the school in North Carolina, every once a month on Sunday, I opened a soup kitchen at my school. And basically it was for the local. They were not necessarily the poorest of people, they were farmers. But I felt it was the best way to introduce vegetarianism to the local community. The GMO organization had taken over the entire rural area of North Carolina. And so many of our farmers had started to suffer from throat cancers and things they'd never had before, because they all bought into this product that can't refertilize, the product that is just incredible thing. And that used to be the best satsanga, the best seance that I could give, because the enjoyment of what a vegetarian soup and oven baked bread tasted like was, they couldn't fathom that it could taste that good. Most of which came from my garden.
Yes.
And so it's just a question of food for one must be food for all.
Yeah. And I suppose, what you are saying is there is no such thing as absolute veganism, absolute vegetarianism.
No, absolutism is not good.
But, even if we take one little step to be conscious about how we understand our relationship with food, because we're also part of this whole food chain.
The whole cycle, absolutely.
Yeah, because we all going to go back.
Yes,
no matter how much of gourmet food I eat. I mean, I don't, but I'm going to die one day and become part of the 5 elements. And that's the Vedic concept, is that it is neither evidence-based nutrition nor is it absolutism. I think we are moving towards a culture where it is about ego-based nutrition.
Yeah, which is worse than both evidence-based and the other.
Yeah, which is in a way terroristic.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
But it's way too individualistic.
It's too individualistic. Yeah, that's right.
It's way too individualistic. It doesn't help the general good. Our good cannot be for the self alone.
Mm-hmm.
The plants, if they thought like that, we'd be starving.
Yeah. The amazing fruits they produce.
Not only that, they bend their boughs just for us to be able to pick it. I mean, they don't even want us to work. You plant a seed into the earth, and the next thing you know, you see the miracle of this little green sprout shooting through this dense earth amid everything. It absolutely defies the weightiness of the earth, and then it starts growing into this exquisite plant that can feed us.
So it's not just about the food groups, it's also about our attitude, our behavior.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you have a lot of choices to say, no, I'm not going to eat this, I'm going to share this. Because one of the things that really surprised me moving from India to the West is that I was working in a natural therapist college, but everybody was holding their food to themselves. And in India, you never did that. You always shared food.
It was always there. Yeah.
You didn't even ask, are you vegan, vegetarian? You could have had chicken biryani, and it could be a Brahmin sitting next to you on the bus, and they would say, would you like to try
some? I know.
But what I mean is, I'm not criticizing. What I'm saying is that it's amazing how it's all about our mindset. It's not just about certain food groups. It is
look at the whole social arena of people who follow incredible food groups. It becomes so difficult. You go to a host, you're invited to a lovely place. You either bring your own food, which is so boresome, or the poor host has to go and pre-think all the things you cannot have. Then your entire evening becomes this boresome, what I cannot have. And where is the rasa, the life, the intelligence, the joy, the joie de vivre? Where is any of that? It's all gone, it's all dampened because we're so connected to the fact that we only eat this. We can't eat that. I mean, what nonsense is this? This is an obsessive nonsense.
There is an interesting Indian mythological story where it is this devotee of Shiva who was called Vedara Kannappa, and he basically offered meat as food to Shiva, and there was another Vedic Brahmin who was offering the best of the vegetarian food.
Absolutely.
But then Shiva appeared in front of this Vedara Kannappa, and the Vedic Brahmin was very upset about it. You know, when I'm doing everything perfectly, why are you blessing someone who is harming animals and offering this? And then, this is a mythological story to send a message. Shiva says that's because, he's doing it with 100% purity. And he is sharing what he's been brought up with, what he knows as food. So he's not judging.
He has no ego with that meat.
I mean, honestly, I'm not propagating vegetarianism, veganism, paleo.
No, but we're saying that the overriding factor, the greatest poison, is ego. Is our ego.
Yes. Yeah.
It is the greatest poison whatsoever. It's to take that adamant stance that this is correct and this is not correct.
We're almost coming towards the end of our live webinar, and I have got two questions.
Surely.
One is Carolina has sent that it's been sent from somebody on YouTube, and also I'm very thankful to Thomas Miller, who's been helping me with this, and to Laura, who's been helping us in making this possible. And Thomas also has a question, I suppose. So I'm going to first of all read a question that's been sent to me by Carolina. I don't know who it is from, but it says, by not drinking milk, raw organic, as in, is the individual inadvertently harming oneself? Plus, the question I sent last night, I mean, which I think you have answered, but that's a good question. By not drinking milk, am I harming myself?
Not directly, really. We're not harming. The self has enough rasa and enough health to compensate for not having milk in its body for a while. There are cultures who are also organically allergic to milk, to lactose, even the best of milk. But what it is that we're doing is we are isolating and dividing and separating a whole group of species, the cow species, by discarding their milk and discarding their purpose as well. They also have a purpose to fulfill, and their purpose has always been nurturance. And so I think it's an interesting question to answer. What would you add to that, Dr. Vijay?
No, I don't think by choosing not to eat something, or by choosing to eat something, we are going to inadvertently harm ourselves unless there is a specific medical indication. For instance, if somebody has casein intolerance, not even allergy, of course, even if they are not vegan, they shouldn't be having
exactly.
That's for medical reasons. I think. I'll take Thomas's question.
Surely, yes, of course.
Thomas.
It appears that several times, or very often, there is a layer of, or an element of categorization when you put people into the category of non-meat eaters and the category of meat eaters. It almost appears that the meat eaters are the ones with the lower consciousness, whereas the non-meat eaters are the ones that are more higher evolved in their consciousness. That's why they choose not to eat meat. What's your comment on that?
And it's a very broad question, and it's a controversial one as well, but I'll do my best with it. We cannot judge the level of consciousness by our diet, number one. But by the same token, we can say that a person who makes a conscious choice to not harm another species, another animal, who is living in Ahimsa, the act of nonviolence, the act of being extremely mindful and aware, is using more of their consciousness than the person who mindlessly goes and eats whatever had been generated from the barbaric act of butchery. And so, yes, in that sense, we can say that if the person is mindful of what they're doing, they're using more of their consciousness. And if the person is not mindful of what they're doing, they're using less of their consciousness. But we cannot make the broad statement that one person is more conscious than the other. In many cases, the people who are making the choices and the movements that we're talking about are people who have huge egos and stand in their own way because of egotism and because of the internal need to be right about what they believe in. And so I have found, I will tell you this, I lived in the South, in North Carolina, for 18 years with my school. And these are just normal farmers who never even visited the next town, the towns next to them. They were so gullible and innocent that Triphala pretty much took care of all of their diseases. They were so receptive, their tissues were so open and so receptive to things. And I had met more kindness, and these are all meat eaters, from these people than I had from so many people who run the health food stores.
Yeah, so I mean, I think ultimately there's more to think about when it comes to living in a Vedic way than a table that says these food groups are the ones one can eat.
Right.
So it is not a list of foods. It's a way of developing relationship.
It's a relationship to Mother Earth, our own consciousness.
Yeah.
How mindful we become that the food, that no creature is being hurt
Yeah.
for us to survive, and how much work is put into bringing to our table something that's salubrious and wholesome for the being.
So we almost come to the end of our allocated 1 hour of this live webinar. There are two things I like to say before we conclude. One of it is, actually, I don't drink cow's milk. I'm making this confession, not because I'm not vegan.
It's all right.
Okay, it's for health reasons. I don't have intolerance. But I remember my great-grandmother who lived to her late 90s. She would tell, she came from a farming family, and she would tell, whenever her daughters gave birth and they came to her home for postnatal care, after the calves fed on the cow, automatically the cows would milk, start lactating.
Lactating is true.
And she said that was fascinating because almost the cow knew that there is a baby which needs milk, or the mother who needs milk in order to nourish. So, this story came to my mind from what you are saying is, actually, humans don't control the whole planet.
They don't control the whole planet, and the cows are so much more nurturing and giving. A cow cannot live without the human affection. And I saw this because I used to ohm with the cow. I remember the story of my ohming in the fields of the cow, because they had an eye disease, and I thought if I ohmed with them and chanted Rudra, it would cure it. And the farmer was, of course, Christian, and I just said to him, I'll chant some hymns.
Yeah.
And he said, hymns. I said, yeah. So he allowed me, and so in the morning I'll go at 6 and do the Rudram with them, and the cows would ohm back.
I remember you ohming in New Zealand when we were driving, and when someone asked, I don't know that woman.
Yeah, the cows would ohm back. But then I would leave and go on my long trips. And when I came back, they were so sad and neglected. They felt so neglected.
So the message is, Vedic nutrition is not about neglecting cows. It is actually about protecting cows.
Absolutely.
So if you're thinking about
the Shakahari is the greatest protection of the cow.
Yeah.
Shakahari.
Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Maya Tiwari.
It's so lovely.
And I'd just like you to talk to our members and viewers. Where can actually they benefit? Where can they get more information or even training to learn about Vedic way of living? Do you have any programs?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. We've started an online program which has a food, breath, and sound, Vedic nutrition, full-year course, and we'll have many other short-term courses as well. It's on wiseearthonline.com. And if you check that website, you will see all of the offerings online. We also have on-site in America, and there's also an advocate here in the United Kingdom that does the work of Wise Earth Ayurveda. Her name is Linda Bretherton, and she can also be reached through our website.
Thank you, Maya Tiwari.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to all of you for participating in today's live seminar. This is first of our series, and the APA is committed to bring more of these webinars, and we are going to be sharing with you very shortly who is going to be our next guest and when the webinar is going to be. Please do not forget to send your feedback, your comments, because this is our very first webinar. So we would like to actually improve and change in a way that it's going to help all our members. Have a fantastic weekend. And I think this vegan versus Vedic nutrition has given us a good food for thought for this weekend.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you.